Hey, I'm Tommy, and I'm coming to you from the Fort Lauderdale Air Show parking lot. So it's early in the morning, it's like 7 a.m. right now, so the lighting might be a little bit weird. But what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take you into the field so that you can get some firsthand experience and visualization of air show photography. We're gonna put all that gear that we talked about in the last video to use and go through things like settings and file management and battery management, things like that while you're out here, as well as maybe some behind the scenes video clip stuff, like just show you like some nice fun things you can capture for social media. And then when all that's said and done, we'll go back to the house and I will run through the photos with you. And if we find some good photos, then I will go ahead and do a little post-processing for that as well. So this should be a really fun experience. I hope you really enjoy it. We have a lot of good headliners today. So I know the F-35 Lightning is going to be on display. I know the F-22 Raptor is on display. And at the end of the whole show is the US Navy Blue Angels. So that'll be a lot of fun to photograph. I think this is only the second time that I've been able to see the Blue Angels. So it'd be a good experience for me. And yeah, that should be the whole experience. I hope you enjoy this little guide through the air show, and let's get to it. So yeah, I'm walking to the venue now. As you can see, it's just a sidewalk and a bridge, a good half a mile to a mile or so just to get to the beach itself and actually see the show. Parking fee was $20 in cash only, so that's always important to have. The sidewalk right now is a kind of a benefit, but eventually you might be walking across grass or soft sand or something, which is why I'm talking about having the bags on my back instead of having a rolling cart. And that's always like a good thing to have. This venue actually allows coolers, so I got like a little lunch pail kind of thing going on for today too, which is pretty fun. But yeah, that's kind of it for, just a simple walk over to the venue and have all the gear on hand. I'm gonna use quite a few cameras for behind the scenes, mainly this GoPro, but also my cell phone and my Insta360 Go 2, which is the little thumb-sized camera I talked about in the last video. So the picture quality might be all over the place at the final video, but it's just so that you could get the full experience of what I'm doing. I'll also go into detail about those cameras sometime over the course of the day, I hope, if I remember, to kind of just talk about what we're gonna do when it comes to like capturing a good clip for Instagram or whatever you're gonna do with it. But yeah, here we go. Okay, so we're fully set up on the beach now. The Fort Lauderdale Air Show is a little bit of a different air show, so I'm gonna add a couple tips to this one. The beach itself is the entire stage, right? So they go on a whole 2-mile strip up and down this beach while they do the show. So it's gonna be actually kind of difficult to find show center. When you're actually at an air show most of the time and you buy a ticket, they already have a designated spot, like this is where show center is gonna be. And for the Fort Lauderdale Air Show, it's a little bit harder to get to. It's a lot more confusing and things get a lot more difficult to find where the exact center of the stage is. But for photography, you really wanna get as close to center as possible. And then just a little bit off to the side of the center is like the perfect spot to go, because then the aircraft will be the closest to the audience around show center. At least that's what they aim for. So the aircraft will be the largest in the frame when you go to take that photo, and you won't have to zoom in as much. This is extremely helpful if you have like a 300mm lens, you don't have to worry about getting that extra reach like my 500mm distance will go. To find show center in a weird show like this, I always look for two things. You look for big building landmarks. So here's a building right there. So you see that building? That's actually one side of show center. And way down there, there's a pink building, and that's another side of the show center. So you want to kind of look for landmarks that the aircraft can easily identify as a good spot. There's also barges out in the ocean, which I don't know if that's going to show very well on a GoPro. It's probably just dots. But those those barges and stuff are usually helpful indicators of show center as well. And then the final real tell-all is the VIP seating. VIP seating is always the most expensive seating in the place, and they usually have like sun protection and seating and all sorts of cool things like that. So that's a really good opportunity. If you get as close to that as possible, you could still just pay for a regular ticket to get into the show and then get as close as possible to the VIP thing. You'll be closest to show center that way. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about my setup here. It's just an umbrella on a chair, like a golf umbrella and a chair that I was talking about in the last video, and then the bags that I'm talking about. I added a cooler and some other stuff that we'll get into right now. The cooler is just because this particular air show allows coolers. Check your website to make sure that they do allow coolers to be brought with you, because some places they make you dump out drinks and not allow any coolers to be here. But yeah, I have a cooler and a sweat towel, but also because this is Florida and the weather is off and on spotty at best, I have a rain jacket and a dry bag for my camera to go into in case it does start pouring on us while we're out here. Hopefully there won't be too bad of storms today, because that could potentially cancel the show schedule. So hopefully that's not the case. But yeah, then of course my camera itself, and this is how my chair is normally set up. A lot of times I use the chair more as a staging area for my camera gear and how I'm gonna operate all of my gear. I use these like little twist ties to hold the umbrella to the chair. Although this air show in particular, I'm trying out something new and it seems to be working really well. So, let's see if the camera can pick this up. It's a 2 clamps and a magic arm. So clamp 1, clamp 2, and a magic arm. Each of these clamps are only like 10 or 15 bucks. And I think even this clamp came with a magic arm. So this seems to be holding the umbrella really perfectly and keeping it as still as possible. And I could just move the magic arm whenever I want to readjust the lighting. So that works out really well in my overall setup. Okay, so now we're going to talk about gear and overall setup. As you can see, I'm looking at the ocean right now and the sun is at the ocean. So if I point the camera towards the ocean right now where the performances are going to go on, I'm going to get a terrible exposed shot. Shooting into the sun, no matter how hard you try, is always going to be not the greatest of photos. So you always want the sun at your back, so that, as you can see, I'm perfectly exposed thanks to the sun pointing at me. But then when I go like this, now I have this awful shadow going on. Well, with the aircraft actually performing in the ocean, that's going to be an issue normally, but actually considering how early in the morning it is only 9:45 right now. The air show starts around 12 o'clock. The sun will be directly overhead and it'll be out towards the clouds. So since it'll be west of us, then that means the good light will be pointing towards the ocean. So this kind of setup is actually ideal to get good, well exposed photos, because the sun is behind me while I'm pointing that direction to get to the air show. All right, now we're gonna go into the main gear. We heavily went into detail on this on the prep work video, but I'm gonna go ahead and throw the overall view of everything here. First things first, I got this Spider Pro belt. This is just to keep the camera casually on my hip so I can quickly draw it whenever I need to. I've got that shotgun mic that I was talking about before. and that's going to go on the GoPro just to get cool jet engine noises. That's the wind help, if you will, for that. It's called the Dead Cat. And then in here is my behind the scenes camera. It's the little Insta360 that I showed you before, the little thumb camera. All right, and those of course have mounts. I have two different mounts for it. I got one for the lens hood, and I've got one for the camera itself. And then that's kind of all that's really in here. And then we have the camera as like the main package, right? So I put a battery grip on this one just because it's a lot easier for me to change batteries in and out with that. It's just like a magazine feed system. So I could just, you know, hit this little lever, turn this knob here, and then boom, there's my batteries ready to go. So that's how I have that set up. You don't need a battery grip. It's just one of those things that's really fast for me to change out with. And then I have a lens hood. And the real importance of having a lens hood is in bright sunlight, this helps reduce any kind of lens flare and any kind of harsh shadows. So all it is just a piece of plastic that goes on most lenses. You could buy one of these separately if you have a lower end lens, but if you have a L series lens, they usually come with the hood. The hood is important to have on here just for that overall blockage of sun flare and sun glare. However, there's also, I put a piece of Velcro on here, and the reason why is for this little mount here for my thumb camera, I could just Velcro that to that lens hood pointed at myself, and you'll see some of those shots as we go about the day. The bottom of the collar here is, right now it's in the down position. I might move it to the side, but this is just the spider pelt, the plate, the spider belt plate that could just sit on my hip nice and easy. So now we have this bag, and this sling bag is very important for a lot of things. In the front pocket, I have like a rain jacket for my camera in case it does rain and I'm actually using it still because it's not raining hard enough. Lens cloths, because we don't want any salt or sand to be on the lens in the way. I've got a bunch of power cords, and the reason why is I'm gonna constantly need to be charging things, probably more my phone than anything. So I actually have a power bank set up to charge stuff. Like right now, my GoPro's batteries are very terrible, and the camera tends to turn on and drain the whole battery. So I have it charging one of the ones that had already drained before I even made it to the show. From here is also where all my memory is and my backup hard drive that you saw before. And then all of my batteries are in here. So I have them by dates, and these are the ones I was talking about, or this is the most recent set of batteries I bought, was in January of 2023. And these are fully charged, ready to go, brand new batteries, right? I have two in the camera, but I'm gonna shoot with those two for the most part. And then when the time comes to get like the headliner, I'm going to use these batteries. So I'm gonna make sure to take the other ones out of the camera, put these ones in, use them, and then take them back out and put in the originals again. Because I wanna make sure that the charge is as maximum as possible to get the full amount of frames per second firing rate that my camera can provide. I know when the camera battery drops to like 50% or something like that, the frames per second firing for burst mode will be reduced, so I don't want that to happen. So that's where I'm gonna swap out on those. And then what we're gonna do here is we're actually going to take, I have two memory cards. I got one in the camera right now, and then I got this one right here, right? And this one is brand new and fresh and empty. When that one gets full, I'm gonna put it into here, top slot, and it'll back up all that stuff. And while it's backing up to this hard drive, I will be using this card for shooting, and then, you know, vice versa. Once the backup's finished onto the card, I can format one card and get ready to go with the other card for backing up, and I'll just keep doing that cycle over and over and over again to make sure that we have, you know, a fully working system where I'm always using the top of the line card when I'm doing this whole bit. So that's pretty good there. I also have a sun shirt. I don't know if I'm actually going to use it because I have plenty of sunscreen. And that's kind of it. Like, that and this GoPro that I'm recording on are kind of the only things I brought with me. I don't need the optional wide angle lens because we're on the beach and the only thing that's happening is over the water. So there's nothing static parked on the ground, so I don't need any wide angle lenses. That 100 to 500 is plenty of distance for both up close and far away stuff. And hopefully we're at show center so we can capture some really great shots. I'm pretty sure this is where I need to be, and I'm pretty sure I'll be able to capture whatever I can. Okay, so I'm doing all these clips before the show actually starts, so we're gonna be facing the west more than we're gonna be facing the east anyway. But I'm gonna talk about settings for both jet photography and prop plane photography. They are different, but also you can just use these one settings to get through the entire show and everything will be fine. So jet photography is, there's no moving props or anything like that on the aircraft itself. So you can kind of just freeze the action in air as it's going by. You're gonna be panning and moving as fast as you could. I know that probably was dizzying. Anyway, you're gonna be panning and moving across the sky to get that shot. So you're gonna wanna freeze the action as fast as you can. That means you're gonna need a fast shutter speed. I generally start on a nice bright sunny day like this, I generally start around 1/2500 for a shutter speed because I know I can freeze the action with that and higher for sure. This also allows me to then take off the stabilization if I want off the lens, because at this point, at that fast of a shutter speed, you're not gonna need to worry about whether or not the stabilizer will keep the shot. And sometimes it might even hinder your shot. I usually leave the stabilizer on because I could just keep my focus point in the center a lot easier that way. But, you know, just having that faster shutter speed is very helpful. Another thing I like to use is a pretty shallow aperture. So I want to try to get a small aperture of f8 or f9. And this is why I was saying you can get kind of any lens that has a long telephoto to work fine. You don't need a huge aperture telephoto because the deeper the aperture goes, the better you can get more of the aircraft in focus. You're shooting into a sky. It's not really the end of the world if the clouds are slightly out of focus kind of thing. So I always like to shoot between f8 and f11 even, if I know I'm going to be photographing something where maybe a few aircraft are flying together. I want to be able to capture the full depth of wingtip to wingtip. If you go shallower than that, there's a good risk of you just get the front wing and the back of the plane is out of focus in a bad way. So I just say stick with a smaller aperture as much as you can. So that's why I say f8 to f11. Now you can use these settings. Don't forget, when you use these settings, of course, that means it's gonna be pretty dark. So I would say you're gonna need a decent ISO level, and we can use denoise applications and stuff like that in post if we really need to. For the most part, you don't, but sometimes you will. And I like to shoot around ISO 640 to 800. Obviously, when you get a deeper aperture, you're gonna wanna go higher. I usually don't use more than like, I don't know, 1200 for an ISO or 1000 ISO. I really don't use a whole lot for that, but 640 to 800 is usually a safe bet to keep things going like that. If you have to increase the ISO, by all means do it. I know a lot of the newer cameras these days can handle it. So those would be my settings for jet photography. Oh, and while I got you here, a nice ideal one that I will set my camera to start off the entire air show is 1/2500, f9, and then ISO 800, and then just adjust from there. So keep that in mind. That's kind of like a great setting starting point to start on a bright sunny day like this. If it's cloudy, you're gonna need to adjust. If you don't like how much noise is gonna be in the photo at the end result, you're gonna need to adjust. But yeah, that's basically it. So we're gonna talk about prop plane photography, which is completely different than jet photography in the sense that you wanna get the motion blur of the prop spinning in the shot. So your settings are gonna have to be drastically different. The prop will look like a toy if the props are not moving in the sky. So it looks like a fake shot almost. So it's a lot better to have that motion blur prop spin, but it gets really, really difficult, all right? It's one of those things that if you're trying to capture with this slow of a shutter speed, you will also get the prop blur, but you'll also get the airplane out of focus as well, because you'll get too much motion blur there. But it's a good starting point just to play with, to practice. It's extremely hard to do, and burst mode will still kind of work for this, so you can play around with that as well to try to get a good shot. If you get one, great. If you don't, no big deal. Just try again and everything should be fine. But the shutter speed is going to be always at like 1/125th, and then I either go up a little bit if I want, if I manage to achieve the prop blur and I want to see if maybe I can get a sharper photo, I'll increase it to 1/250. And if I'm not getting the prop blur to make a full circle, then I'll decrease it down to 1/60. And that's just kind of the range that I like to use. So start at 1/125th with a deep aperture of like f11 or higher, and then your ISO is only going to be like 100 to actually make it work. All right, so now we're going to talk about focusing modes. This is kind of a debated thing. A lot of people use different kinds of focus modes, and I want you to experiment and kind of play for yourself and see what works the best for you. But for me, I like to use back button animal eye autofocus, point autofocus, and horizontal zone autofocus. And I will switch between those with the Canon's control ring. So the control ring can be set to anything you want it to be set to. I set it to change the focus mode between point and zone very quickly based on what's happening. The reason why I use all this stuff is point mode. Sometimes you just need to manually put the focus point on something, so that's why I use the point mode. I also use the horizontal zone autofocus whenever there's multiple aircraft in the sky, because then I'll leave the camera to decide what focusing modes or what focusing points to choose to make sure everything is in focus. I also use animal eye autofocus instead of vehicle eye autofocus, and that's set to my back button autofocus. It's very important to make a button that's very comfortable on the back work for you. Oh, the wind is blowing down everybody's umbrella. So anyway, the back button focus, program it to animal eye detection, and there is a vehicle setting on a Canon camera. I know some other camera manufacturers have that as well. I purposely don't use that one because I feel like vehicle is only really accurate when you're looking at cars and stuff. So animal eye autofocus actually surprisingly works really well because the autofocus will see the cockpit of the aircraft and distinguish that as the animal's eye. So you're basically photographing a metal bird in the sky with that kind of focusing point on the cockpit. So I use back button focus for that. And then when the back button focus isn't really working as well as I'd like it to focus track, I will switch to just using point or zone autofocus depending on whether there's one aircraft or a whole bunch of aircraft in the sky. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about before we go into like just behind the scenes montage stuff as time goes on is the schedule. So schedule performances, you usually can get a list of all the performers and what's happening in the order that they're trying to present it in. I say trying because if there's any emergency or a maintenance issue or a weather issue or whatever, another aircraft is flying through the airspace and they have to wait, the air show will change very drastically the order of operations of performers. So with that being said, I like to try to keep in mind that, you know, this isn't a set in stone list. This isn't guaranteed for what you are going to see. But also, it definitely won't be, for the most part, in order of operations that they actually claim that they're going to do. So I use this more as a checklist, have this list written down, have all of the things that are performing for the day so you know what you've seen and be able to cross that off, because then you can anticipate what the next show is going to be, and then that's when it's a good opportunity to like switch batteries or switch cards based on like, oh, I know that the F-22 is going to perform next because, you know, these other performers had gone on and this one hasn't yet. So like, just kind of a helpful thing to use is make a good checklist, write down who performed, or just cross off a list of who performed so you can understand what to shoot next. This is what the schedule was supposed to be, and this is what the schedule is. So, or actually was. So some of the shows didn't happen. Okay, so hopefully all the audio worked out on that one, and you got a lot of information out of this as far as what gear I brought and what settings I'm using. I actually found the center stage barge. It's not too far off from here, so that's really awesome. I'll probably show a little clip of that just to show what it looks like. And then, yeah, we're just gonna wait a little while, have some food and some drinks, and then get to photographing some really cool performances. Here we go. All right, so that was the entire air show from start to finish. I tried to film with all the little behind the scenes cameras that I could, including this GoPro and the Insta360 Go 2, which is that little thumb camera. And then of course my phone. You'll probably see quality differences, hopefully not, but if you do, you just have to bear with me because that's how we're gonna try to summarize everything. I also managed to get a few clips of some of the aircraft with my Canon R5, so that's gonna be pretty fun to show on the film. And we'll go into a little more detail on stuff like prop photography settings and jet photography settings. I'll show you what kind of ones that I used, as well as when we get back to the house, we'll also do some culling and choose what photos we're gonna do, as well as you know, just the post-processing in general of the photos. I did both a crop view mode and regular mode to see if that kind of helps with how much I need to crop on this particular air show. A lot of the stuff, even as close to show center as I was still pretty far away. So it's going to be one of those kind of photo shoots where a long focal length is definitely helpful, but also some of this aircraft kind of goes onto, well, like right up against the shoreline. So that's also really good too. So anyway, hopefully this head, oh, and yeah, the fire rescue just hit the lemonade stand, so that's interesting. But okay, so it's a little overexposed, but we made it back to the car finally, so I could talk about everything that went down. It is indeed a little over a mile to walk back to the car, and there was just pandemonium everywhere. Apparently emergency vehicles slamming into vendor vehicles and everything else. So I'm now back at the car, and all of my stuff is in the car, and the first thing I want to do is back up everything. So that means this GoPro, all the memory will go into that hard drive. The last 2 cards that I didn't format, they'll still get dumped into the hard drive to make sure they go and be backed up and everything good to go. Also having one destination. And even that little thumb camera, if you plug it in while it's in the charging case, and you can plug it into that backup hard drive I have, it can back up as well. So we'll probably go ahead and do that as well. Once everything's there, all I have to do is just take that hard drive and plug it into the computer when I get home, and I can offload all the videos and all of the photos that I have. So that's why I was saying, if you could find something like this, by all means get one of these. Otherwise, all of this stuff, you're gonna have to keep just the one copy without any backups, without anything like that going on, and just hope that all of your memory cards are safe and you can unload them when you get home as fast as you could to a safe source. If you are going that route where you just use card after card, I would recommend having all of those cards in a card wallet and then in your pocket. So this way it's 100%, you know it's on you. There's no other cards in the camera or in the bag or anything, because heaven forbid your bag gets stolen for whatever reason. You don't want to lose all those photos that you just spent all day in the hot sun taking. So yeah, that's my big recommendation, is keep those cards in a card wallet in your pocket. All right, that's it. I hope you had a great time. I hope you got to get a lot of information out of this, and you know, even though my video formats are all over the place, I hope you still gathered all the information that you need so you can get out there and photograph your own aircraft at your own air show. It's a lot of fun. It's definitely a challenge, but one of those challenges that's very rewarding when you pull off the shot. And now I have to drive home, so I got to go sit in a line for a very long time to get out of this parking lot. But I hope you had a great time. I hope you got all the information you needed on this. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. I will do my best to answer them whenever I can, or maybe even make a follow-up video that can kind of answer whatever questions anybody has. If you like the work that I did here, this is my first time trying to make like a compilation in the field video. Please go ahead and send me a like and a comment, and maybe even hit that subscribe button if you're really interested in seeing other information that I like to put up about photography in different genres, really. Oh, and if you're interested in seeing any of my work, both from this air show and previous air shows, go ahead and follow this Instagram right here. And then here's also my website, just because I shoot a lot more than just air shows. So I hope you enjoyed everything, and yeah, I'm kind of brain dead from the constant go of this air show, so this might have came out a little weird, but yeah, it's a good time. It's always a great time. And now I'm gonna go home, jump in the pool, and we'll get to get some rest after all this. So anyway, have a good one.